Hello and welcome to the Wisden Cricket Weekly Podcast. This summer, Wisden are proudly sponsored by Kia UK. Kia is leading the way in electrification with their groundbreaking range of EVs. Kia have taken strides in the future of mobility with their award-winning lineup, including the EV9 and EV6. They also have a commitment to movement that inspires and wants to help cricket fans get closer to the action. Listen to the show every week over the next month or so for Kia's movement that inspires moment for chances to win exciting experiences at the Kia Oval this summer. A week or so into the T20 World Cup and England are in real trouble. Defeat to Australia and Scotland's mauling of Oman means that England are up against it for qualification for the last 8. We'll talk about all that as well as the US's extraordinary super over win over Pakistan, India-Pakistan, the New York pitch, Afghanistan's tournament, and much, much more. I'm Rana, and with me today is Ben Gardner. But first, let's head to Mark Butcher for his thoughts on England's campaign so far. Butcher, it's not been a good start for the tournament for England. They were sloppy against Scotland, where the rain potentially saved them from an awkward chase. And then against Australia, they were comfortably second best. It felt a little bit like the 50 over World Cup in that England made some bold calls that you can see the thinking behind that just didn't quite work. Let's start with the first one of those. Will Jacks bowling the second over of the game that went for 22. What did you make of that call?
Well, you're right. I could see the thinking behind it. You got two left-handers in. The caveat, and it looked like it was preordained. You know, they decided that was what was going to happen. Now, Mo's first over went for 3. At that point, you might think, you know what? We're ahead of the game already. Let's hit them with the best that you've got. But they went with Jacks, the off spinner. Short boundary, wind howling in that direction, and Australia sort of suddenly made up for that slow first over and were ahead of the game after 2. So, you know, it backfired spectacularly. But look, those are calls that you make, I suppose. And on another day, you would have done something different. It got them off to the worst possible start, but it wasn't the end of the road as far as the game was concerned. But things that I think are perhaps more pertinent and things that might not even change for the next couple of games are sort of things around selection again. Now, I think I must have said, I did say back about a month or so ago in one of the podcasts that if Johnny Bairstow was not going to open the batting in the T20 World Cup, then he probably shouldn't get into the side because you know, his play in the middle overs against spin is not as adroit as somebody like Ben Duckett's. England struggled for left-handers, with the exception of Moeen Ali. Duckett against spin in the middle. Zampa's spell was always going to be absolutely critical. Would be a better bet than Johnny, and so it proved. And the other thing is that not having Reece Topley in the side, given that you've got Jofra Archer, you've got your sort of high speed impact bowler. I just think having that left arm option with his height and the way he bowls cutters into those type of pitches would be more useful to England than Mark Wood. But those things are because you sort of started the tournament with that and it hasn't gone very well. The sort of generally speaking, what teams will do is stick with what they've gone with, saying that was the right decision in the first place. It's still the right decision now. I'm not so sure. So, you know, there are a couple of ways that England can improve the side or make it more balanced anyway, given the squad that they have. But, you know, it's just, it seems as though everything that Butler and Mott try, whether it's slightly out of the box or slightly conservative, seems to be going against them at the moment. And, you know, part of that is due to performance and part of that is due to the fact that other teams are there to play well too.
Yeah, we'll get to Bairstow in a second, but just on the bowling, I found the Jacks thing particularly interesting because Jacks is someone who I've almost been surprised at how little he has bowled for England in white ball cricket. That was his third ever over for England in T20 cricket. And England, when they had so much success in white ball cricket, were known for their aggression. And here against Warner and Head, two destructive batters, you're starting with 2 finger spinners. And I get the matchups in your favour, but Jofra Archer has got a really good record against David Warner in particular. And Reece Topley, who you mentioned, not selected. And I know before the tournament, people were generally saying England would pick 2 of Topley, Jordan and Wood. these conditions were perfect for Topley. Topley has got a brilliant, if you're going to go matchups, Topley's got a brilliant record against left-handers with a new ball. And Australia's two of their most destructive players are left-handers. It felt almost defensive.
I'm with you 100%. I mean, I didn't see a scenario beyond Topley being injured where he didn't play. So, I've been as surprised at that as you are. And again, the Jacks thing, I get the thinking behind it, but I do think even if you've gone into the game with that as being your plan, your master plan, Mo bowling the first over for 3, you know what? Let's hit them with Joff. They're under the pump already after the first over. Let's hit them with the best bowler we got. But obviously they decided not to do that, and things ran away from them pretty much from that moment onwards.
Mm. So you mentioned Bairstow earlier. Would you make the call to bring in Duckett or maybe with Sam Curran? I've seen a couple of people say that Sam Curran is a really good 6 hitter in comparison to Duckett, so maybe he could be an option as well.
I think these pitches have been tricky, haven't they? There's not been any flat ones amongst them. So I want as much batting skill in there as I can possibly get. And although Sam is a very good hitter of spin, I just think before our innings started, Zampa's 4 were going to be absolutely crucial. And when he came into the attack, he had a couple of right-handers to bowl at, and one in particular in Johnny, who's quite a stiff player. He's a hitter of a cricket ball, and what they needed was somebody with a little bit more touch, and what they needed was a bit more left-right through the order. And that was flagged up before the tournament started. That England could potentially only have one left-hander in the lineup, whether that be Curran or Mo, and that could cause them a problem if teams were going to hit them with left arm spin or with leg spin, and so it proved. And I just don't think. You've probably got some numbers on this, but this is more of a feeling from my point of view. I just don't think that Johnny Bairstow is as good a player, as impactful a player coming in anywhere below the top 2 as he is when he opens the batting. And so therefore, even before they got on the plane, I thought if he wasn't going to open, which was very unlikely, or bat 3 at least, that Duckett was a better option.
Mm. Yeah, with Bairstow's where he's played in T20 cricket, it's almost more interesting to look at how and when he's been moved around the order. So if you go back to 2018, 2019, he was one of the best T20 openers in the world, had an amazing IPL opening the batting.
With the Sunrisers with Warner, yeah.
With Warner, exactly. And then around about the pandemic time, he was moved down to the middle order.
That was when Josh went up, wasn't it?
When Butler went up. And people forget this because England haven't actually played that much bilateral T20 cricket over the last few years. And Bairstow, with his leg break, missed a lot of it. But before the 2022 T20 World Cup, so the one they won in Australia, Bairstow was going to open for that tournament. England, when they announced their squad, announced that Bairstow would open alongside Butler. Literally the next day, he breaks his leg. He's out of that tournament. Alex Hales comes in. They win the World Cup. They then don't play much T20 cricket. And then there's a series that probably everyone's forgotten about at home against New Zealand last summer, where Bairstow opened the batting, did really well. Butler actually moved down the order into the middle. So it looked like England were considering going back to where they were 4 or 5 years ago. And then he didn't play any T20I cricket from that series until the Pakistan series just before the World Cup. And then I guess partly because of how well Butler and Salt were going in the IPL, they moved back up. And then Bairstow, having done really well opening in his most recent appearance for England, was back at number 4, where his record just isn't quite as good. It's not bad, but it's not great. And his record up top is really, really good.
Is great, yeah.
And we talk about Bairstow being messed around a lot with Test cricket. And to be honest, I feel sorry for him in this situation where because he has done really well when he has opened, and they've accommodated not just Salt, but Will Jacks ahead of him in the order as well.
Yeah, but again, the calculation that you make when you pick those squads is your top 6 or whatever, your 7 batters or whatever are all much more comfortable at the top of the order, every single one of them. And so therefore, you have to make the decision as to, okay, not necessarily which one is going to do better for you at the top, but which one out of those guys who would rather bat at the top is going to do better for you in the middle. And Johnny's not that guy. So, this is not a slagging off of Johnny Bairstow by any means. It just isn't his super strength to go in the middle orders when spin is on, start against that, and be able to take those guys down. It'll take him down if he's been in, if he's 30 not out, having gone in at the top. But it's just not his super strength. And so, when you're building a team, you kind of have to build it around the relative strengths of people. And if you have 5 of them who are all better off at the top, you have to work out which ones are going to do better for you in the middle. And work it that way round, rather than look at who the best openers are.
So you'd bring in Duckett for Bairstow rather than change things around up top and potentially bring.
Well, I think they've made their bed there with Salt and Butler opening, haven't they? And so you don't want to change everything. So it becomes a simple case of making as fewer waves as possible, and just bringing one man out and putting another man in. But like I said, I'm not sure they'll do that, because then it would be admitting that they kind of got it wrong in the first place.
It feels like England have been hampered by just the lack of T20 cricket they played as a group.
I don't buy that.
Really?
I really don't buy that. I don't. They've got players there with an enormous amount of experience in the main, and I don't buy it, honestly. They've all been playing T20 cricket, different franchises, high quality, high pressure T20 cricket. I don't buy it. I don't think that the decision making around the absolute minute detail of how you might put the team together has been right, but that doesn't make any difference or it doesn't, for me, give them an excuse not to individually perform at a higher level. And the other thing is, and again, something that we talked about beforehand, is having that cold-blooded finisher of an innings at the back end. They don't have one of those, and that was always going to be a weakness going into it. And so therefore, you're relying upon the top order really to kind of get you close enough that you don't have to worry about somebody putting together 60 off 40 balls to see you home with 2 balls to spare, because that just isn't a super strength of the side, and it might be the one thing that they're missing out on. I think they have everything else covered if they put the right 11 on the field. But that is the one thing, right from the get-go, that you'd sort of say, okay, well, there isn't a guy for that there, or at least there are 2 that they hope will, but that hope has been forlorn for quite some long time in Livingston and Mo.
In a week's time, Butch, England could genuinely be out of the tournament, given how well Scotland beat Oman. England are in real trouble from a net run rate point of view, and they've got to be careful that they don't go almost too hard in those games searching for that net run rate boost, because we've seen in this tournament that the associates are capable of beating the big guys on their day, and Scotland did really well against Oman to boost their net run rate, and England actually didn't come close to Australia in the end, so took a bit of a hammering themselves.
Yeah, agreed. And England's 2 games against Oman and Namibia are over before England play Scotland. So Scotland play Australia. So Australia will have an idea as to how they need to manage the game against Scotland in order to knock out a very dangerous rival in England. So it's a horrific place to be in. And from the moment that game was rained out in Barbados against Scotland, you could see this scenario happening unless England beat Australia and sort of made a nonsense of it. And of course, you're assuming that Australia are going to beat Scotland. I mean, I think they probably will, but that's the assumption. So it's looking really, really dicey. Again, not much you can do about the weather. I mean, that is highly unfortunate. And getting a little bit closer to Australia in the loss, because that's 50-50 game every single time, right? Either side could win that from the get go. Getting a bit closer and not having such a massive dent in the net run rate would have made that more palatable. But now once again, Mott and Butler find themselves under an enormous amount of pressure to get things absolutely 100% right, ahead of 2 absolutely they're not just must win, they're must destroy games, aren't they? So it's looking sadly like another miserable old tale, unless they can pull something out of the bag, get the combinations right, and play the way that they are capable of playing. Because I still think with the players that they've got, that they're among the best in the tournament.
That Australia-Scotland game could be fascinating to watch, because Australia could know exactly what they need to do to knock England out. There could be a situation where they know that if Scotland lose by fewer than 30 runs, England are knocked out of the competition. And we've seen it before. So Australia played West Indies in the 99 50 over World Cup, and it was a slightly different situation in that wins from the group stage carried through to the next round, and it was between New Zealand and West Indies to be the last team to qualify from a group. And New Zealand had beaten Australia, so it was in Australia's interest to knock New Zealand out. So Australia took 41 overs to chase down 111, and Steve Waugh and Michael Bevan afterwards admitted that they were deliberately going slow to try and knock New Zealand out. It didn't quite work.
Yeah.
So there's history for this happening, and before people start shouting about it, I sort of think it's legit. England are a more likely possible winner of the tournament than Scotland. So if it's in your hands, why not try and knock them out?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's the same old argument around. There's that thing in county cricket, where teams have been penalised at the back end of the season for, I don't know, setting up matches or whatever. If a win or a loss one way or the other benefits them in terms of league position, and I think it's legitimate. I mean, I really do, simply because the league is played over, 15, 16 matches, and the position you end up in is the position you've kind of deserved, no matter what happens in that last match, or at least the situation that you've left yourself in, no matter what happens in that last match. And as long as you're not doing anything that is against, the laws of the game, then all is fair in love and war. And the same in a group stage. If you find yourself in a position to be able to knock out one of your closest rivals, then you pretty much do whatever you can to do it. So don't expect any favours from the Aussies. And frankly, why would you?
Yeah, and also, I'm not going to lie, I'm really enjoying the needle between England and Australia these days. Like they clearly don't like each other in a way that might not have been true 5 or so years ago.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. That's just reminded me of something. You remember the Reddit we did last week? And I got a bit of a surprise question about something that I would change in the game of cricket if I had the power to. And it happened last night. Or was it the night before? Was it the leg bye given out erroneously LBW that went for 4 byes and they end up with a dot?
Yeah, and they lost by 4 runs.
And they lose by 4. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean it's just nonsense, isn't it? Imagine that had been the last ball of the game, and the umpire fires off somebody when the ball's missing leg stump by 2 yards, and it goes for 4, and you lose the match dot ball. I mean, it's just a nonsense, absolute nonsense.
Would you just make it that the umpire has to wait to give their decision until the ball is dead? Or, do you know what I mean? Because once the finger is up, the ball is dead. That's the issue, that they haven't found a workaround yet. Yeah,
well, exactly. But in cricket without DRS, that decision is final. When the decision is no longer final, then unfortunately that's a bad way of doing it. I mean, it's pretty straightforward. You could still have him put the finger up, but the players, if you feel that you're going to review, you still carry on with your runs and whatever, and then you make your review and you find out afterwards, and it gets cancelled out if you're out. But that's a nonsense. Umpire error costs the chasing side 4 runs and costs them the game potentially.
I feel like that's the sort of thing that will only be changed if a World Cup knockout game is decided by that. Unfortunately,
it could happen. I mean, the group stages as they are with 4 matches or whatever they are knockout, aren't they? You don't get in the top 2, you're going home. So, the importance in that game is the same as the importance in a semi-final, is the same importance in a final. It's either the right thing to do or the wrong thing to do. And I think it's the wrong thing to do.
Well, that's it for today. Butch, next time we speak, we'll either be talking about England having been knocked out of the tournament or why they've still got a really good chance of winning it. So
yeah, well, I mean, if they stay in, that means they'll have sorted out 1 or 2 of the sort of the squad or the 11 issues, and then we'll have a really good chance, as they did before it started. Whether and other things go in their way, but I dearly hope that is the case, because it will be, it could very well signal the end of the Butler-Mott partnership if they go out in the group stages here, because consecutive World Cups with the talent that they have available going south would not be palatable, I don't think.
Definitely. Well, cheers for your time, Butch. Catch you next week. For this year's first Kia Movement That Inspires moment, Kia is giving you the chance to win the best seats in the house for Surrey, Gloucestershire in the T20 Blast on the 14th of June at the Kia Oval, which is this Friday. You and up to 5 friends or family will get the opportunity to watch the match right next to the pitch with a VIP experience, including food, drinks, and a tour of the inspiring Kia Oval. We've spent a bit of time there over the last year or so, and these really are the best seats in the house. For a chance to win, all you need to do is enter via the link in the description. Ben, we've heard about England, but Australia looked really good. Warner and Head were brutal up top, and Adam Zampa was outstanding. Adam Zampa out-bowled Adil Rashid in this game. What makes Zampa so good? It feels like he's come on a few levels in the last few years.
Oh, yeah. I mean, he is really good. He's also he's interesting, isn't he? Because because you don't see him so much in the franchise stuff. Like in some ways, there's a similarity with Adil Rashid there, and that his white ball greatness is founded in international cricket, which is that's happening less and less. A lot of players you can pick out like a key franchise triumph as well. But he is specifically prioritising this. Like he doesn't go in for IPL auctions because he's like, this is the thing that makes me really happy. Like I know I can get a lot of money as well. And he is he's doing all right for himself. But he is really focusing on Australia. And it's hard. Sometimes it's hard to pinpoint exactly with leg spinners because so much of the craft is actually like, sometimes you look at is this guy bowling quicker, is he bowling slower? And so much of the craft is actually down to figuring out what is the thing to do on a given day.
Yeah.
And he just seems to have got so much smarter and more confident that he can do all the different types of things. So yeah, he is a brilliant bowler, and it's such a good team. Like you look down, it's like you just kind of think, geez, that's good.
You're
basically.
good and you've won everything. You're good, you've won everything.
Yeah.
But it is quite interesting reflecting on Australia. Why do you think they, a lot of people, ourselves included, tip them to be front runners for the competition? Maybe not favourites, but definitely in the top 3 or 4 teams. If you compare it to England, Australia have basically not got any new players over the last few years, but have improved as a white ball unit significantly, whereas England, in comparison, have got a bit stuck in the last 2 competitions with a broadly similar group of players that got them great success between 2019 and 2022. Why do you think Australia have really come on in the last couple of years?
Well, I mean, you can look at some specific players. Like Travis Head has just gone from being, a guy who people thought was pretty good to being, one of the best all-format batsmen on the planet, and that's just a thing that has happened. He's, we've talked a lot about him, but he's just got better. Basically, you can say the same actually for Pat Cummins as well. I think who there was some of those really high-scoring games in the IPL where there was one where Bumrah obviously took ridiculous figures. Like, well, that's because he's Bumrah, but Cummins did as well. It's like, oh, okay, so he actually not saying he's on the level of Bumrah, of course, but he has just improved as a T20 bowler from looking at a guy who was of the test quicks, like the least suited to it. He actually now is a very useful player, especially in kind of those middle overs. That
he bowls difficult overs, so sometimes might not have the most eye-catching figures at the end of a tournament, but actually the job he does, if you compare the bowlers in other teams who do his job, man for man, he's basically Australia's Chris Jordan. I guess Chris Jordan bowls a little bit more at the death, but in both of them bowl difficult overs, and Cummins so regularly has really quietly effective figures.
Yeah, and Mitch Masters just got a bit better as well. That there are still holes in that team. Like I know Warner, he played well in that England game, but I think it's still asking a lot of him to have the kind of tournament he had in 2021 when he was player of the tournament. This is his last tournament for Australia. He's dipped a little bit, hence why his career is kind of coming to a close. They're kind of juicing out everything they can from him, but he's not the absolute elite David Warner he once was. Maxwell is just having a tricky time and had a bit of a tricky time against England. Obviously Butcher's discussed it, but they won that game because they got ahead so far in the first 6 overs. Had they not done so, there'd been a bit more scrutiny on that Maxwell innings, which was a little bit of a drag in the middle, and it comes off the back of a really, really poor IPL where he had to kind of drop himself. So there are a few holes there, but there is also just so much pedigree down the order, and because there are players who are in form, it means that you can kind of cover a little bit for the ones that aren't. They've just got enough players who are doing the right things, basically.
I don't know, we already covered it with Butch, but I know our listeners love hearing about England doing badly as much as they do when England are doing well. Why do you think it hasn't gone right for England so far? I guess they just haven't played that much in T20 cricket recently, so it's hard to work out where they are. They've not had a huge amount of time to work out combinations. And, let's face it, they're 2 games before the tournament against a Pakistan side who are probably not quite as good as we thought they were going into the tournament.
Yeah, I guess One thing I would say is I'm wary of going in too hard on England. This was, they were beaten comfortably, but beaten by a very, very good team. And, they are a little bit unfortunate to be in the position they're in. I mean, we don't know what would have happened against Scotland, but had they managed to get back on for 10 overs, or had the rain even come at a different time and it'd been a 5-over thrash and England win that, then at this point they're kind of basically through. Whereas now they are, in a really tricky position. But there is a bit of unfortunateness there. I think they're also just a bit of a team in transition in that, we think Jackson Brooke will be brilliant, but they are young players who are still finding their way a little bit. Bairstow, on the other hand, is a player who is, he's struggled for form for a little while and is still struggling for that now. Butler is obviously, he is very good, but can't do it all himself. And then you've also got Salt, who is kind of in a sweet spot right now, but it is a relatively short sweet spot. And there have been, he did really, really well on some really good batting tracks in the Caribbean for England at the end of last year, and in the IPL, really good batting tracks with an opening partner who really suited him. I don't think we're yet, even as good as that IPL was, I don't think we're yet saying that Salt is one of the very, very best white ball players in the world. And you look at just how good some of the other teams are as well. We talked about Australia, but there are that South Africa batting lineup is
it's extraordinary, isn't it?
There's a lot of players who maybe aren't quite as good as maybe it's assumed they are. And we talk so much about England's white ball batting depth. And I think sometimes that can mean two things. That's overall, the average of England's maybe 10th best player, or the players from 10 to 20. There's quite a lot of that is depth, but that doesn't mean that your best 6 is going to necessarily compare with the other country's best 6. I think maybe that's a little bit what we're seeing as well. And then also I kind of think with Butler and Mott, there's just a lot of decisions that at the time you're you can kind of just about see the thinking, and then they backfire. And maybe again, that's a bit of misfortune, but it does just keep happening that you're thinking that there is just something funky going on in that decision-making process. And that is an issue through the World Cup and kind of now, I think.
So that result, combined with Scotland chasing down 150 against Oman in 13 overs, means that England are in a spot to bother. So in that Scotland-Oman game, Brandon McMullen hit 61 off 30 to get Scotland home in super quick time. Scotland have been very impressive so far. They're a wily team. They've got a lot of tournament experience. A lot of players have been involved in that Scotland group for a very, very long time. You talked about England being in transition. Scotland have actually been in transition as well. They've lost players like Carl Kurtzer and Callum McLeod and don't look weaker for it. And they've had scalps in their 2 most recent T20 World Cup appearances. They've beaten Bangladesh and West Indies in the previous 2 tournaments. They've got a very good chance of finishing in the top 8 this time, because England need to win their next 2 games and Scotland need to lose against Australia for England to have a chance of going through, and they need a net run rate swing. What sort of net run rate swing are we talking about?
So it's probably not as big as some people are assuming, and it's probably just, I think people hopefully know how net run rate works, but also you can look at a number and see that it's really big or small and negative or whatever and think that's bad. But because it's an average, England, it's better England's being -1.8 having played 1 game than it being -0.7 having played 3 games, if that makes sense, because then your next game will only count for a quarter of it. So England, to ensure that there's basically nothing, to ensure that Scotland need to beat Australia, England need to win by about a combined 100 runs, or with about a combined 10 overs to spare, with about 10 runs equal to 1 over if they bat first or chase and that sort of thing. Cool. That's very, very, very rough, but that's to show the sort of margins we're dealing with, which is not impossible.
Scotland beat Oman with 7 overs left. So if England do that on Thursday, they only need to beat Namibia by 3 or so overs to put themselves in a position.
Yes, yeah. And then even then, say they go by 40 runs and 40 runs, it'll sort of work out that whatever margin below that England sort of leave within those 100 runs or 10 overs, that's what Scotland can lose by to Australia in order to go through. So say Australia, if England win by 40 runs and 40 runs, Scotland might be able to lose by 20 runs and then go through. It's something around there.
But we could have the dream scenario of Australia know exactly how much Scotland can lose by to go through ahead of England, which would be amazing. I know that we follow England closely, but that would just be brilliant for the narrative. Yeah, no,
it would be extraordinary, and very, very much could happen. But and also, sorry, I think because also people are sort of saying, well, Australia aren't going to just throw a game or not try their best. But I think also just the scheduling work against England, even if Australia like you will just naturally ease off a bit if you're already through, and you'll rest and rotate players, and also that collusion can kind of happen naturally. Like say Scotland know they need 150 and Australia make 180. I could easily see them bowling spin in the middle overs. Scotland are going at 7.5s. The rate in the match is rising up to 20s, and
Australia are fine because it doesn't affect them.
Exactly.
Yeah, 100%. The result of the tournament so far is undoubtedly the US's super over win against Pakistan in Dallas. I was watching the game at a school reunion. So my old school booked out a pub, and people who had left the school 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30 years ago were all in the same place. And you had this great moment where you had loads of people who had no idea who each other were, just watching it huddled around an iPhone, and everyone was gripped. An extraordinary game of cricket, and the US thoroughly deserving of the win. We're going to hear from Saj Sadiq coming off his long run on Pakistan in a minute. But on the US first, Ben, they just played better cricket throughout the game in all three disciplines. And they hadn't done a lot in major tournaments before this one, but they look a serious side.
Yeah. And I think people are probably overplaying the extent to which this was a shock, at least based on the caliber of the two oppositions. I mean, Saj will talk about Pakistan's struggles, but also just USA. They are comfortably a better side than Canada, who are a decent associate side and showed that in the first game tournament as well. And they'd beaten Bangladesh comfortably in a series before the tournament. And as we've seen in their two games so far, Bangladesh are not a bad side either. So
and neither are Canada. They beat an Ireland.
Exactly. So like actually, just none of these teams are as far apart as you might have thought in tournaments gone by. And USA are actually. I mean, it's funny as well because we've had less testing of how good they are because they didn't have to qualify for this tournament because they're hosts. So you've been a little bit less sure. But then also, I mean, the fact that Corey Anderson was just sitting unused in the dugout and they still beat Pakistan, but they do have these players that we know are good. And it's the players who have been around the setup longer who were some of the stars of this. I mean, the best story is probably Sour of Netravalka, who is he takes 2 for 18 in the main match. He's Indian born, and he actually played for India in the 2010 under-19 World Cup, in which they lost in the quarterfinal against Babar Azam's Pakistan. So by 2 wickets in that game as well, in an India team with Mayank Agarwal and Kehra Hall, I think the two big hitters in that. He's also just got everything going for him. He's pretty good looking. He's he goes to University of Mumbai and then goes to Cornell University in the US, and then is sort of working for Oracle as an engineer, doing pretty high tech stuff.
And he's still working for them?
Yeah, he is. His actually, I think his LinkedIn bio lists him as let me get it because I got it open because this is the only time I use LinkedIn is looking up cricketers will see this, but it lists him as a principal member of technical staff at Oracle, professional cricketer.
Yeah.
So he's got the order right. He knows who's paying his money at the moment. And even people who work with him at Oracle were sort of sharing sort of screenshots of Slack of being like, Sarah will be away for the next couple of weeks on annual leave.
But it could be more than a couple of weeks as they keep going.
Yeah.
But he was outstanding bowling his left arm seam, and Ali Khan was another, bowling 89 miles per hour. He's played a bit of cricket in the Caribbean Premier League, but it's a serious attack, and on their day you can see how they can trouble any team. And if they beat Ireland, who lost to Canada the other day, they are just through. There's no net run rate permutations there. Yeah,
exactly. And also how the tournament actually works. If Scotland go through, which again not guaranteed, but if Scotland were to go through and USA go through, they will be in the same Super 8s group. So it's not that far off one of them needing like one more kind of surprising result, but not that big a surprise with how good they've shown themselves to be so far. And you're looking at one of those two in the semi-final of a World Cup, which would be amazing. Yeah.
Just on the tournament in general in the States, I think there's a little bit of misunderstanding around the purpose of the tournament partially being in America. It isn't just about getting new people into cricket. That's obviously a part of it, but it's also about engaging a significant number of existing cricket fans from the South Asian diaspora in particular, who, relatively speaking, for the world of cricket, have a lot of disposable income. And I know crowds for, not all crowds have been great, but for games involving India, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Nepal, Bangladesh in the States, the crowds have actually been very decent. You had 6,000-7,000 at least Nepalese fans in the game at Dallas, for example. The Pakistan-USA game, packed house, predominantly Pakistan fans. India, Pakistan obviously was always going to be well attended, but Bangladesh, South Africa at New York yesterday, also very well attended. There is this actually very, very big cricket-loving audience that's in America. We should just have more cricket for them in the first place.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, I still think there is a little bit of a missed opportunity for a bit more cut through. And I mean, the USA national team have done that themselves, and you're seeing, it's been fun seeing some of the clips on US news shows being like, oh, we're the greatest team in the world, or just not quite understanding cricket, but in quite a sweet way. I mean, I don't know if you saw the New York Times thing as well, saying that India beat Pakistan 119-113.
Which I also think is a totally reasonable way of describing a game, particularly in which the team batting first wins.
Yeah. I don't want to totally cede the right to make fun of Americans for getting things wrong. But yes, I think that is also probably fair. But there still has been a slight, some of the tickets for the India-Pakistan games, I think there might have been a little bit of creative cam work here, possibly. Like there was one stand that was selling tickets for sort of the really, really premium tickets that were a few days out from the game. You could still get loads of them, and they were priced from the lowest was $2,500, and that is probably too much to be charged people for a game of cricket, I guess.
Yeah.
And yeah, the games are all on Willow TV as well, who do a great job of servicing that cricket loving audience in the US. But it's
not exactly BBC One in the UK, is it? So it's hard for people to stumble upon it. Yeah. Which I guess is not a problem unique to cricket in the US.
Yeah. It almost felt like there were so many journalists doing articles like, how come no one in the US knows that the World Cup is on? That the most likely way a civilian in the US could find out the World Cup was on was because a journalist does a piece interviewing them saying, did you know there's a World Cup on? And that's how they find out.
But yeah, I guess my general point is that cricket's starting point in the US is probably higher than people assume it to be. Anyway, here's Saj Sadiq on Pakistan's 2 losses, first against the US and then their collapse against India New York. As always, Saj in fine form, particularly after a Pakistan defeat. Saj, it feels like you ever come onto the show after a Pakistan loss. This week there have been 2 Pakistan losses, 2 that I feel will live long in the memory. Let's start with the US game. Do you think Pakistan were complacent in this one?
Well, I think if you judge by Babar Azam's comments, where I think he almost admitted that they were a little bit complacent. I think he used the word relaxed. So that tells you a lot about the mindset, really. They probably thought, well, it's only USA. They don't really play cricket. These guys only play baseball and basketball and American football. And with all due respect, I think Pakistan went into the match probably thinking that it was already won, which is always dangerous at any level, especially international level. USA are there on merit. And to sort of underestimate a team, especially in home conditions, Pakistan slipped up and they didn't deserve to win. You can say sometimes that they were possibly unlucky or there's some questionable umpiring decisions, but no, you can't do that at all. Pakistan, in all facets of the game, they were outplayed by America, and in a way, Pakistan were almost lucky that they went to the super over. And then the super over, I mean, the tactics were just abysmal.
What do you think they got wrong in the super over?
Well, I think I would have given the ball to Naseem Shah. I thought he was the best bowler. I know Amir's an experienced bowler, and I've got a lot of time for Mohammad Amir. I think he's a good T20 bowler. But I would have given the ball to Naseem Shah. As I say, he was your best bowler. He was your most threatening bowler. And then with the bat, I mean, just what are they doing? Get fuckers the man on strike. He's the guy who's your big hitter. What is the point of Iftikhar Ahmed and these guys going in there? And Iftikhar Ahmed once in a while he'll score big, he'll hit a few good shots, but fuckers the man was the guy that you wanted on strike, and he's stranded at the other end and did nothing.
And Pakistan were really quite sloppy in that super over. USA scored 18. and they only hit one boundary, and that was a boundary 4, 3 wides from Amir, and every single time they ran through to double the wide tally. There was a fumble in the outfield. There were overthrows as well. It's quite impressive to pack all of that into one over. Why do you think Pakistan was so sloppy? Because you mentioned that Baba said that they were relaxed at one stage. They certainly weren't relaxed at the end. It was almost as if, despite their additional experience, they themselves were finding the pressure harder to manage.
That's the key word, pressure, and that's what I was going to say. I think in the past, Pakistan has had leaders. They weren't always the most disciplined guys, but you had guys in the team who would grab the others literally sometimes by the scruff of the neck and say, come on, let's get going. We can do this. We're going to go out there and win and show people. Prove those doubters wrong. Those guys would lead from the front. Nowadays, I look at that squad, I look at that team, and there's a distinct lack of leaders. 1 or 2 guys that you can say are captaincy material, but even the captain himself. I mean, I can't imagine Babar Azam saying to his team and lifting the spirits and getting them like G'd up and getting them really going ahead of any match, never mind a super over. I just thought they were really sloppy. And as I say, it comes down to poor leadership, poor tactics, and a lack of leaders is the key word.
What do you think happened in that department? Because when Baba first became captain, they had 2 good global events in a row. In 2021, the T20 World Cup, they came very close to getting to the final. They memory beat India in the group stage, and actually people were surprised that they didn't get to the final. With that young core with Shadab, Baba, Rizwan at the 4, Shaheen as well. They got to the final in 2022. Who knows, they could have won it had Shaheen not limped off the field, injured with 4 overs to go. It's a similar group of players. They had a very poor 50-over World Cup where they did not meet expectations. And here again, they're not out of the competition yet, but it's been a really, really difficult start to the tournament. Why do you think that they're struggling for leadership? Their key figures have been around the group for a long time now.
Well, I'm actually surprised that they are struggling for leadership because most of these guys respected captains within the Pakistan Super League. You mentioned Shadab, Rizwan, Babar, Imad Wasim. You know, they've all captained in the Pakistan Super League, various franchises, and they've been playing cricket for a long time. I guess the word unity comes into it again in Pakistan cricket. Now, I know in the past the team's been divided, but once they got on that field, they put all the differences behind them. I don't know whether these guys are actually putting all the differences behind them or not, because the body language looks really poor. And Babar Azam cuts a very lonely figure most of the time on that field. You very rarely, I mean, Shoaib Malik, look, he got stick over the years, but he was always somebody who was, whoever the captain was, he was in their ear, advising, offering his thoughts. They weren't always accepted by the captain, but he was always there, advising the captain, supporting, making suggestions. Now I look at this team, and Babar's sort of looking around the field, and there's not many of his teammates who are actually going up to him and saying, well, you know, why don't you move that fielder there, or why don't you try him in the next over? He looks a pretty lonely figure, and I think that's one of the biggest problems.
Pakistan cricket media is full of reports of rifts in the Pakistan camp going back quite a long time now. 1, do you believe that there are rifts there? And 2, if there are rifts, what are they over? This is a World Cup, surely, as you say. If those things exist, you put them aside for a 3 or 4 week tournament.
See, I think if Pakistan had beaten India, there would have been no talk of rifts at all. I have it on pretty good authority that the rifts are being exaggerated. I think Shaheen was disappointed at being replaced as captain, as any cricketer would be, because it's embarrassing. You know, you get one series and the guy that you replaced comes back. And I thought Shaheen was treated harshly, unfairly, and I think it was an error. Me personally, I would have continued with Shaheen Shah Afridi as captain. I'm not saying Shaheen's a much better captain than Babar, but if you've made that change, you carry that through. You give him a year, 2 years, which is a long time in Pakistan cricket as captain, but you give him that opportunity to show what he can do. And he's proved himself in the PSL as captain of Lahore Qalandars that, you know, he can face the pressure, he can handle it. So perhaps that's the reason why there are these little differences between players. But as I say, I have it on pretty good authority that it's being blown out of all proportion, as things generally are in Pakistan cricket when they're not doing well.
Moving on to the India game, we've seen enough cricket now at that New York ground to know that chasing 110 to 120 can actually be quite tough. Run scoring in that venue is so difficult. That said, Pakistan got themselves in a position that should have been enough to seal the game. 47 or 47 required with 8 wickets in hand. And like the US game, they got a lot of basics wrong. There were huge pockets of space where you could drop the ball into gaps and quite easily pick up 2, for example. But the middle order didn't really look to do that. There wasn't any invention until Naseem Shah came in at the very end and played a few enterprising shots. And it was a similar story in the US game as well. There was a period of play after they lost their second wicket where I think Pakistan scored 25 runs in 6 overs. Other than Shadab Khan, there was a real problem with, strike rate in the middle overs. It feels like this debate's been going on for a long time. People blame Babar and Rizwan for not taking enough risk early on. But when the middle order underwhelms so often, you can see why they feel like they have to do the work themselves. The batting just feels like a complete mess at the moment. It's just completely out of sync.
Yeah, I mean, the batting, I was very surprised that an experienced coach like Gary Kirsten didn't try to think out of the box. Babar tends to play it safe. And I would have thought that Kirsten would have said to Babar, let's surprise the Indians. Let's do something different. And I would have sent Fakhar Zaman into open. And whether that's probably with Rizwan. And I would have said to Fakhar, go out there, give us 4, 5, 6 overs, thrash the ball around. 25, 30 runs from him at the start of the innings, run rate of, 7, 8, and 9 and over. India wouldn't have been able to claw that back. Instead, Pakistan opened with Babar and Rizwan. And to be fair to them, they started off okay. But then you could gradually see the Indian bowlers getting momentum and Pakistan not getting the singles. And it was the usual story, really. They get bogged down. And then Usman Khan came in and he was battling as if he was a rabbit in the headlights. He just looked terribly nervous, the lad. You can't blame him. He's only played a handful of international games. And then, Fakhar Zaman came in and did his usual, hit a couple of good shots, and he was out. I mean, they were 72 for 2 from 12 overs, despite not batting brilliantly. And as you said there, they needed to run a ball with 8 wickets in hand. Only Pakistan can lose from there. The win predictor was 92% in Pakistan's favour. And, how they threw it away. I mean, I don't like to single out individuals, but I thought Mohammad Rizwan, given all his years of experience in the PSL, in various other leagues and international cricket, he was the chief instigator in terms of messing that run chase up, because you could see with every passing delivery, he was getting more and more bogged down. You just need singles. You don't need 4s and 6s. And Shadab Khan, to be fair to him, he came in and you could see that he was hitting the ball, as you said there, looking for 2s, but he wasn't out there very long. Whereas Mohammad Rizwan, he just got completely bogged down. And shot he played, I mean, I played a few of them in local club cricket, and my captain berated me. So I don't know what his captain or coach said to him, but it was a disgraceful shot, having been out there for so long.
And it's also not managing risk very well. It felt like he wasn't taking many risks at all, not taking enough risks. And then when he decides to take a risk, it's an extraordinary risk. It's Bumrah's first ball back into the attack. Bumrah is going to be the most dangerous Indian bowler. And it was a crazy shot to play, given the situation and given how he'd been going up until that point. I just wanted to pick up on one thing you said about Usman Khan being very inexperienced. And earlier you were talking about how Shaheen Afridi, his captaincy tenure was extremely short. It feels like everywhere in Pakistani cricket at the moment, there is chopping and changing. You look at the T20 side, it feels like there are so many batters over the last few years have had a good PSL. They've had a run in the T20 side, but not a very long run in the T20 side. And then it's someone else's go. And then there's captaincy changes. There's changes to the coaches. There's changes to the administrators. It feels like no one is being given the best chance to succeed. And until Pakistan cricket sorts that out, we're going to keep seeing games like this?
Well, I think this is the problem. There's too much emphasis on PSL performances. Yes, the PSL is Pakistan's premier T20 tournament. It's a well-known franchise league around the world. But I think back to many players over the years who've had half-decent PSLs, a couple of good innings, and suddenly they're playing international cricket. Whereas the likes of India, they're young batters. They've played 30, 40, 50, 60, sometimes even more first-class matches. Never mind T20 matches in the IPL, their grounding comes in first-class cricket. Our guys, most of them, they want to play just T20 cricket. They don't want to play first-class cricket. I don't want to pick on the guy, but we use the example of Shadab Khan. He's not played first-class cricket for years, and yet he keeps getting picked for Pakistan. Me, personally, I would say to these guys, if you don't play first-class cricket, you're not eligible to play any international cricket. Never mind T20 cricket or Test cricket or whatever. If you're not playing first-class cricket, not available for first-class cricket, then you shouldn't play any international cricket for Pakistan. And, this is where Pakistan cricket is falling down. These rushes of blood almost in selection, in picking players. I mean, look at Azam Khan. He has no right to be playing international cricket at the moment. If you look at his domestic record, you look at his first-class record in wicket-keeping, in batting, the guy is just not ready for international cricket yet because he's done well in some obscure T20 league. Suddenly he's the next big thing.
So your point around first-class cricket is essentially that players need to learn the fundamentals of the game, and that holds you in good stead for tournament cricket.
Absolutely. I understand those guys who've retired, who played first-class cricket in the past, but when you've got guys who I say are fairly young, like Shadab Khan, who are just focused on playing T20 leagues around the world. I was speaking to Mansoor Amjad, the former Pakistan leg spinner. He's a coach in Sialkot, and he was saying exactly the same thing to me about Shadab Khan, that he's forgotten the basics of leg spin bowling because he's only bowling 4 overs every now and then in league cricket. Instead, what he should be doing is bowling 40, 50 overs a match in first-class cricket, where his action is tested, his ability is tested, his stamina is tested. And only then should guys like him be actually eligible to play in T20 cricket for Pakistan.
I guess if Shadab was here, he'd say that there are examples of lots of players from other countries who are successful T20 players that are playing a lot of first-class cricket. I mean, Adam Zampa is probably a good example of a similar type of cricketer to Shadab, who barely ever bowls as a red ball. He seems to be doing okay.
Yeah, but the thing with Adam Zampa is he's played a lot of first-class cricket in the past. So he's proven that he has the ability, he's got the variety. His bowling is on an upward trajectory. If you look at his bowling, the accuracy, the variety, he's a very smart bowler. Shadab Khan goes through phases where, he's not spinning the ball at all. You can see there's problems with his action. I'm not a bowling coach, but I can see some of the issues with his action and his rotation, etc. when he's bowling, because he's just going through the motions. He knows that he only has to bowl a maximum of 4 overs, and it's just too easy for these guys at the moment.
And finally, the Pakistan at the time of recording are not out of the competition just yet. There are limited options available to them. They only have 15-man squads at the T20 World Cup. But would you be making any personnel changes for the last 2 group games?
See, the thing is, that team that played against India, you couldn't fault the selection. I think where the squad has fallen down slightly when they picked the 15 is that somebody like Mohammad Wasim Jr., a fast bowling all-rounder, ideal to come in at number 8. Now you've got the likes of Shaheen Shah Afridi coming in at number 8. It's a very long tail. But given the squad that you've got, I think it was pretty much the strongest 11. Now, whether you want to bring in Abrar Ahmed instead of Shadab, but then that sort of damages your batting lineup. It's a tricky one because you've got that many batters who are out of form, who are just not performing, and you can't pack the team with bowlers. Otherwise, you're exposing that top order. Once again, you're ending up with only sort of 5 proper batters. It's an unbalanced squad that they've selected, I think. And I think they'll just have to probably go with a very, probably the same 11, providing everyone's fit.
Well, it's not over for Pakistan just yet. If they beat Canada and Ireland and the US lose their final 2 games, it comes down to net run rate. So they still have some hope. And knowing Pakistan, actually, none from 2 is probably where they like to be sometimes, and often when they play their best cricket.
But you know what? Yes, it's embarrassing that Pakistan, and with all due respect to the teams in that group, that Pakistan are relying on other results or other teams to help them qualify. It should have been a straightforward process of getting through this group and into the Super 8s. Instead, they've made a complete hash of it. They've made a mess of it. Their cricket has been substandard. Their preparation has been poor. Their tactics, their captaincy, and far too many players have been below par. You can carry 1 or 2 players, but I think when there's just 1 or 2 players trying to carry the other 8 to 9 players, you've got a problem.
More than one problem for Pakistan at the moment. It would take something pretty special for them to turn it around right now. Anyway, Saj, great to speak to you. Catch you later.
Thanks very much, Yas. Take care.
Ben, on India, they've gone for quite an interesting team composition, not one that many people predicted. It means that they have more bases covered than usual. Interesting deployment of Pant higher up in the order, and Axar Patel could be a really, really key player for this tournament, coming in at 4 unexpectedly against Pakistan.
Yeah, and I mean, you say not many people predicted it. To be fair to him, one person who did was Ben Jones. So Jadeja and Axar Patel had never played a T20I together before this tournament. You can see why, both sort of darting, left arm spinning around, as why do you need 2 of them? I mean, his point was that, they do fulfill different roles and they give them that batting depth. And I guess especially at New York is where you would want that batting depth. And that promotion kind of did work, even though Pakistan had such a pace-heavy attack and Akshar is supposed to be more of a spin player. He did do his job of just doing that wicket preservation a bit more. I mean, I guess sort of in the end, preserving wickets didn't help them much in one sense because the guys coming in after just collapsed completely, but equally it meant that slower partnership was really important. And I guess he bowled really, really well as well. There was a really key over that there was a good piece that we had on our site that Naman Agarwal, one of our India writers, did about the tactical calls that decided the game. And there was an over that he bowled predominantly to Imad Wasim, who I guess I just probably talked about, which should be an unfavourable matchup at an unfavourable point in the game. And actually just entirely tied him down. So if there does come a point when India choose between the 2, I'm not sure there will, but if there does come a point, I think Akshar's probably edged ahead of him. But yeah, it's a good team and they've found
Pant at 3 is very interesting,
yes,
because that's just not where he bats in the IPL. And actually, if you compare it to other knocks played at New York, that's arguably the knock of the New York fixtures. It's certainly up there, in particular the rate he scored the runs.
Yeah, you've had some players who are renowned for attacking batting who have really reined themselves in, the likes of Dave Miller, Heinrich Klaassen. But he is the only one who has scored at kind of any degree of pace and made a score. And yeah, I mean, he's Rishabh Pant, so he's brilliant. And we've seen him play kind of ridiculous knocks on crazy pitches where no one else can buy a run. So it's in a way, it's not a surprise, but I think it was even kind of a brave call, obviously, to include him in the squad because he had a good start to the IPL, but there was still sort of a few little niggling questions about it. And then to pick him ahead of Sanju Samson, who is also a brilliant T20 player, and then to put him at 3, it's all brave stuff, backing a guy who's had, so long out with such a horrific injury, and it's really, really paying off. I guess it's interesting to see how Sky ends up going as well. I mean, this New York pitch is very much not his type of pitch, but push down to 4, I guess maybe if they get off to a decent start, he might come in at 3 at that stage. But it's just interesting that to sort of see how these guys who are renowned for being so explosive do adapt, and I guess we're yet to see that as much from him as we have seen from some other players. I think
this is the most a team India have looked like at a major tournament recently. I think in the past you look at 11 and you almost lazily look at it and said, oh, he's really good, he's a massive name. But this time, I'm not saying they've got it perfect, but I think the team complements each other better than normal. Even Shivam Dubey in the middle order, he's not necessarily someone people would have expected, but there's a real clarity of thought in his selection. You were saying before we started recording, he's basically amazing at whacking spin. and that's what got him a spot over players with better records overall in recent times.
Yeah, and actually you could sort of sense a little bit of questioning of him bubbling up quite quickly during that Pakistan game when it looked like India were going to lose it. And it was kind of quite unfair because he was kind of having to do a job he wasn't pitching the teams to. Now, obviously, the best players can kind of do lots of things and aren't just faced with a pitch that helps seam and then is like, oh, well, now I'm just going to get out straight away. But equally, I think his selection will be justified whether or not he wins India games in the second half of the tournament when they're moving on to, say Guyana for that semi-final rather than for New York. And yeah, it was also just such a close thing between him and Rinku Singh, and Rinku was a little bit a victim of KKR's success because
just didn't get it back.
Exactly, yeah. But and that's a problem of plenty that India have.
Yeah, but also I think India have not historically been that brave in selection, and I think they've played it safe to the detriment of team composition. Whereas this time they have taken risks. I'm not saying it'll work, but I do think they are trying to do something that makes sense in a way they haven't previously.
Yeah, I get leaving out Kuldeep especially in that because he is their best spinner, and yet they were like, no, actually we need batting depth and
seam bowling depth on that pitch.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So and at times sometimes they have sort of tried to favour batting depth, like with Shardul Thakur sort of as that kind of like weird insurance policy during the last World Cup, and then having to move out when Hardik Pandya got injured. Like that's been India's great challenge, is batting depth versus having the right number of bowling, and they've gone a little bit more batting heavy. But I guess Akshar and Jadeja are both so good bowlers, even if they are similar, that it works so far.
And Pandya had a good second spell in that game as well. So actually, 3 quality all-rounders in any team makes a big difference.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of this though is just that Pandya is fit again. Like, if he were to just get injured tomorrow, we would be having a lot of the same conversation that we had in the 2023 World Cup about India's team balance. How do they how do they cover both disciplines? So it he does make picking a team a lot easier, but even so, they have picked a good one, I think.
We talked a lot about groups A and B. Moving on to Group C, it felt like one of the harder ones to call prior to the tournament because only 2 of West Indies, New Zealand and Afghanistan are able to progress to the Super 8s. At the time of recording, the Windies are 2 from 2, but those 2 wins were over 2 of the lower ranked associates in the competition in PNG and Uganda. The big result in this group so far was Afghanistan absolutely thumping New Zealand the other day, which makes it very difficult for New Zealand to qualify. Afghanistan bowled them out for 75, defending 160. Fazal Haq Farooqi followed up his 5 in the tournament opener with a 4 here, and Rashid Khan also took a 4 there in Guyana. Ben, West Indies, New Zealand tomorrow night is a massive fixture. How do you see that one going?
Yeah, well, West Indies favourites. They would have been favourites even before the tournament, but obviously, especially now having seen how that's gone, and New Zealand as well, which had so long kind of stewing in it because it's just a weird tournament schedule where they've still only played the once, and by the time they play that second game, more than half the teams in the competition will have already played 3 games. It's just weird, and they also hadn't really played together for ages before the start of the tournament. Even when they did, that was a second string side in Pakistan. So you can see why they're a bit rusty, but there's no more margin for rustiness now. So yeah, a tricky position, but it is still, you go through it again and it's okay. It's not sort of that Australia South Africa quality of lineup, but there are players there who can, score runs quickly against that West Indies attack.
Yeah.
And there are bowlers there who can trouble them if they have a good day. So yeah.
And just on Afghanistan, it feels a little bit similar to the 50 over World Cup in that you feel like so much depends on the form of Ramanullah and Zadran up top. The 2 of them in that game scored 124 of the 154 runs that Afghanistan scored off the bat. And those guys, Ramanullah in particular in terms of how explosive he is, but Zadran is actually a very good, very dependable anchor. And given they're almost like a Babar Rizwan combination, but Ramanullah has a gear that Babar Rizwan and Zadran can't really reach. So if they're in form, Afghanistan could be a serious threat this tournament because we know how good their bowling is. Look at the bowlers from that game. It's Fazal Haq Farooqi, Nabi, Naveen Haq, Rashid Khan, and Noor Ahmed. Mujib's not on the side. That's a serious attack.
Yeah, it's funny actually because I think this win was almost how we thought they would win games at the last World Cup.
Yes,
and then actually we found out they had a few more batters than we had maybe assumed, and yet this was just straight up. You've got 2 gun openers, they get you all the runs, and then you've got Fazal Faruqi is so good, isn't he?
Yeah.
So he bowls brilliant. Then you just hand over to the spinners, basically, who, if you're trying to kind of get back into the game against Rashid Khan and Mohammad Nabi, kind of good luck to you.
And then also worth saying that Azmatullah, who had a really good 2023 50 over World Cup, he's an IPL seam bowling all-rounder. There aren't many of those. So he's a very, very important player, and he scored a quick 22 off just 13 balls there. Moving to Group D, that's one of the New York heavy groups. So we've seen a few low-scoring thrillers over there. More generally, how have you found those games? So Bangladesh, South Africa is one of those yesterday. South Africa successfully defending 113. A couple of days previously, we saw South Africa only just chasing 104 against the Dutch. I really enjoyed them.
No, I've come around from them as well. I mean, to begin with, as well, because I thought they might just get worse, the pitches as well. So presumably, like, they're starting out bad, and I don't see how they get better. They have got a tiny bit better.
Have they?
I think very fractionally. I think you've seen less of the ones that are like absolutely like rocketing from nowhere and that are really dangerous. And at that,
that's a good point. We were worried that they'd be unsafe.
Yes,
and they haven't quite been that yet.
Yeah, so because I think after that India-Ireland game, when Rohit Sharma had to retire hurt, you had Ireland players who were almost looking kind of grateful to be walking off because at least they hadn't broken a bone or anything. I was wondering then, are we going to have a venue change here or something? Because but they've just about pulled it around, and I've grown to love it basically. Like it's just created such a specific like tactical thing. Like one thing I was thinking about yesterday was because the outfield is really sandy. The ball is getting quite roughed up, I think, which normally a slow outfield you would not associate with a reverse swing because it would be really lush. But because it's sandy, the ball's getting roughed up. But if you're getting reverse swing, you have to go really full. And that is the one thing you can't do as a bowler on this pitch. So you've got this kind of risk reward thing of, well, I might be able to get some reverse swing here. But then actually, if they can get hold of it, then there's that going on. And then as a batter, again, you've got like the balance between attack and defense. I mean, we saw that with Rizwan and how hard do you go when you go, and can you be getting those ones and twos? I think it's almost surprising that like actually a runner ball has been so tricky, because even I guess because of the ball sort of stopping and being possible to miss time and that sort of thing, actually makes even hitting it into gaps easier. But yeah, it's been really, really, really interesting. And I guess that is, it's funny because you think that's one of the advantages of playing World Cups in different places, but you just wouldn't have expected it from New York when you have this pitch that's been so carefully curated and shipped in from Australia, and yet it's just played like nothing you've kind of ever seen in cricket before.
I think it's been so watchable. Seeing world-class players having to adapt to conditions they've not played, certainly professional cricket before, has been brilliant to watch, I think. There's an unpredictability around it, and seeing even a runner ball be so hard to chase, that's been great. It's a hard group to call. South Africa are effectively through. Sri Lanka are 0 from 2, but you can see a scenario where them, Netherlands and Bangladesh all finish on 4 points. Another general point about the tournament: weird results have effects. 50 over World Cup, a massive problem with that is you can have an upset and you'd have to do a bit of mental gymnastics to really argue why it meant something for the tournament. Whereas here, any upset of any sort has quite a big impact on the tournament. So going into this final phase of the group stage, it's still all to play for in that group and other groups as well. How do you see this group finishing? Because I think it's really hard to call. I think it's a pretty compelling case for any of those three going through.
Yeah, I think so. I was trying to look at the venues for where teams are playing as well, because I think Bangladesh have probably been helped slightly by playing that first game. That was almost as Bangladesh-like conditions as you could expect to see at a World Cup. But they will still be kicking themselves for that defeat yesterday. I think I would still slightly favour them over the Netherlands, but it's going to be so close. That it's kind of the sleeper group, because you obviously got if any of those three teams go through, I guess you're maybe not expecting them to sort of challenge at the back end of the tournament as much as you might have done England, Pakistan if they've gone through. But also it is just great to have like whichever goes through, again, like with Scotland, USA, there will be like a weird result away from the semi-finals. So I would probably just about lean towards Bangladesh, but also you've got what will be fun is just how it ends up finishing, because on the penultimate day of group stage fixtures, I mean, you might want to set your alarms, so I don't know. You've got a half midnight on Monday the 17th of June, you've got Bangladesh, Nepal, and then an hour later is when Netherlands, Sri Lanka starts. So you could easily have a situation where, you know, there's net run rate stuff going on. They're looking over, you know, they're checking the phones. What's the radio called? The transistor radios that they're on, trying to hear what's going on in Kingston. So yeah, it should be good.
Yeah, I mean, if Netherlands win on Thursday against Bangladesh, they're in a really, really strong position going through, knowing that a win would definitely put them through. And as you say, the net run rate thing could be weird, but they could know what exactly they need in the final stages of that game against Sri Lanka.
Yeah, and you've also got the situation this World Cup as well, just in terms of qualifying for the next round, where teams who qualify for the Super 8s are guaranteed to have a place in 2026, and that also could push the likes of Bangladesh, say, into qualifying. And as we've seen from Zimbabwe this time, there is no guarantee you're going to get through those qualifying events.
Well, could England be in a qualifier?
I think that's unlikely, because it's the teams that don't get through, it's then by rankings, and England's ranking should still be good enough to see them go through on that case.
It's funny, we're in qualifying for the Champions Trophy territory already in the tournament. And finally on this week's show, I spoke to Ian Gregory from Chance to Shine about the work that they're doing at the moment on their schools programs and what they do to support their coaches. I'm joined by Ian Gregory, who's a schools program manager at Chance to Shine. Ian, great to have you on the show. First of all, can you explain what you do in your role at Chance to Shine?
So schools program manager role is quite broad, as the name suggests, with our delivery programs. So we've got a number of delivery programs at Chance to Shine. So our street cricket program, which is the community element, and then the school side of things. So main role is overseeing the development of content, the program, the resources for both the primary schools program, which is our most significant delivery in terms of reach, so the number of schools, the number of young people we reach, but also our secondary schools program as well, which has a girls focus and a leadership focus. So that program overview, supporting the network to bring that to life, and a huge part of it is supporting and training the coaches, the many hundreds of coaches who deliver the program up and down England, Wales, and Scotland.
Without programs like Chance to Shine, what does cricket in state schools look like at the moment, if it exists at all?
It's a really, really good question, tricky one as well. I think it's, we're reaching nearly 600,000 young people each year through our programs, and Chance to Shine celebrates its 20th birthday next year. That's millions of young people. So a lot of these young people are experiencing cricket for the first time through having a Chance to Shine coach in the schools. That's not to say cricket wouldn't be great without it, but it's a lot of new experiences. It's a lot of connectivity. It's kind of showcasing that. If we didn't exist, we would really rely on the drive, the passion of the teachers within those environments. And if they like cricket, then cricket might appear on the PE curriculum, both in the primary space and the secondary space. Clubs would, of course, still exist. There would be that local connectivity, but creating a mass first opportunity that we do, that's really important. And I think the fruit of it has been shown in the nearly 20 years now that it has made a difference.
And how are Chance to Shine sessions integrated in a school context? What does that look like?
So take a primary school, which, as I say, it's the bulk of what we deliver at the moment. Generally, we would work over a half term with a school. So most half terms on average are about 6 weeks. That can differ depending on which term and which time of the year. But essentially, we're going into that environment to kind of develop skills over that period of time. So our coaches would select the schools, or our program leads in each county would select the schools that they think most strategically important to them. They would develop a relationship with that school through contacting a PE lead or PE coordinator within that space, or teachers that they know. They might use other local partners to kind of connect in there, and essentially start that conversation about, well, what could it look like? When can we come in, deliver? What space have you got available? Where on your timetable? So most of what we deliver, it will be within PE lessons. So that's important. We understand what physical education looks like in those environments. So yeah, book in with those schools and kind of make a best fit, adapt to the space, all of the constraints that we might have there, which our coaches are brilliant at adapting to, and kind of just essentially bring it to life on the playground. So yeah, it's about understanding the school's needs, when it can work, and how you can then create that connectivity between the school and what other partners, be it clubs, be it community projects, might exist.
The numbers you mentioned earlier were huge. So that obviously requires a lot of coaches to oversee the sessions. Who are the coaches? Where do you find them? Where they trained, etc.
So there's a load of different types of coaches that will deliver the programs, but predominantly they will be employed staff through the County Cricket Board or County Cricket Foundation network. So 39 of those partners. So they will be the employers of, but they're a vital partner to what we do. There are also a significant number, if they're not a full-time member of staff, that we have a lot of casual coaches that deliver these. So people who've got maybe a local interest, it might be someone from a local club that, they've got some time available and they see the real benefit between the connected piece between delivering in a school and those children hopefully then signing up to their programs. Our street cricket tends to have quite a lot of casual coaches, people from the communities who know the area, who know the young people, and they might be familiar, friendly faces in there, and they are absolutely the right people to deliver on those street clubs. So it is a real spectrum, but I'd say predominantly delivered through the County Cricket Board employed staff.
Talk to me a bit about street cricket, because that's something I don't know that much about. How do street cricket clubs operate? When I hear street cricket, it just sounds like the sort of cricket I played in the street as a kid, where you just sort of on a quiet road whack a bin on the middle of the road and hope for the best. I'm sure it's a bit more sophisticated than that.
Yeah, but I guess the principles of what you described there absolutely exist within street cricket, and that's why it's titled that, because the principles, you can play it anywhere. It could be a multi-use games area, it can be an indoor sports hall, it could be, some of them might have a connection with a local cricket club facility. I guess the main thing with street cricket is it brings cricket to communities where perhaps those opportunities wouldn't traditionally exist. So, we've got a wonderful array of traditional community cricket clubs all over the country, and it's brilliant when actually young people have the opportunity to connect there. But there are significant parts of the country where those clubs don't exist, and our main aim really is to look at those gaps and go, well, where could street cricket happen? So is there a local facility that we can connect with that young people would feel comfortable and safe and go to? And that's kind of how we develop it. But at the sessions themselves, it would look like any other cricket coaching session. It's got great coaches connecting with young people, making the best of the environment they've got. I suppose the point of difference for it is the format that we use. So we have a competition structure, which actually this week has been incredibly busy. We've had our regional finals for those. And it uses tape ball cricket and a 20 ball side format. So loads of games on a day, very fast paced. But the key principles with street cricket is that you don't need much kit. You can turn up, you can wear what you want to play the game. It's a tennis ball fully wrapped in electrical tape. It removes so many of the barriers that we might see with a more traditional hardball cricket. And that's a great way to get young people who might have economic challenges, might have limited access to kit, might not know much about the game. So they don't know whether yet, well, do I invest in X pounds for kit? They just want to test it and kind of have a go. So yeah, there's loads of kind of real things that we've looked at to remove as many barriers as possible, just to make sure that everyone can access the game.
You mentioned that we're approaching the 20th anniversary of Chance to Shine. It's obviously achieved a lot as an organisation in its first 20 or so years. What's next for Chance to Shine? What are the sort of new frontiers, and what are the new challenges, I guess?
Well, we've just launched a new strategy called Limitless Futures, which would take us from now until 2028. And one of the main ambitions within the new strategy is to reach 1 million young people each year. So we're currently reaching around just over 600,000 in the last delivery year. We want to increase that. We want as many young people as possible to kind of access the game, and that's both within the schools context, but expanding the street community and club work within that too.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for your time, Ian. Sounds like a lot of good stuff's happening at Chance to Shine.
Absolute pleasure. Yes, take care.
that is everything for today. Cheers, Ben. Cheers, listeners. Remember, Kia want to help you get closer to the action and create inspiring memories that will last a lifetime. Last year, Kia launched a competition to give young cricket players the opportunity to play at the inspiring Kia Oval. And this year, they want to do it all over again. The Kia Young Cricketer competition is an amazing experience for 11 to 16-year-olds to live out their cricketing dreams. The day will consist of a morning session from Surrey's fantastic coaching staff and an afternoon tournament on the hallowed turf. If you are age 11 to 16 and want to experience this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity on September the 14th, all you need to do is enter via the link in the description.